There's really, I wish I could come up with a globally accepted definition. I would be a famous man if I could.
You are a famous man. Welcome to yet another wonderful edition of Thinkly Talks, a place where we have conversation and dialogue with some amazing people from around the world. So we are back in Jaspreet's room today, Jaspreet's community, Plurality Dialogues. Jaspreet, a very warm welcome to you again.
Thank you very much, Vivek. Sorry for the delay. My Zoom app, probably it's been hearing me talk about us moving into the post-app world, and therefore it just refused to work. It just completely refused to work. Sorry about that.
Not at all. I think these things happen all the time. So Jaspreet, it's always fun chatting with you on AI, and I think we have had some lovely conversation with the last 4 weeks. But I think last week was something special. I think the whole chat room was lit with lots and lots of questions when we really talked about AI and singularity, right? And we basically decided to kind of double down a bit more this week on that. Of course, it was aided by Elon's very provocative statement that AI, as we know, is going to be smarter than every single human form by next year. So I think it's going to be, I'm looking forward to the next 30-40 minutes with you. But before we do that, let's just take a quick recap on what happened in AI last week, right? So I'll just quickly share my screen. So basically, if you were to look at it, I mean, one of the things that happened, I mean, a lot of developments happened last week in the area of regulation. On one side, we had EU, which came up with the EU Artificial Intelligence Act. And then on the other side, we had, India, which basically apparently dropped the plans to require pre-approval for AI model launches, based on all the backlash I think they kind of came up with, right? So any reactions on this, Jaspreet?
Oh, it's apples and oranges, Vivek. The EU, all the 20, 30 plus countries, were working on this the right way, thrashing out this act over a year or so, negotiations across different countries. And, what they were doing was that they were building on their GDPR model of tearing different risks, low risk to the highest risk. And they already had something to work on. And they've kind of added on the AI part there. India, on the other hand, was just a statement made by a minister, I think, in a bit of a fit of frustration, if it may. Because one particular model did not show one particular leader in a good light. And so, it said, okay, fine, every model now needs to be retrospectively tested. Frankly, even then I'd kind of talked about and given a statement out to some press people who had called saying that there's going to be rolled back because it's not a law, it's not an act, it's just a statement, it was an advisory, but, it didn't even carry the weight of that. So I don't think there's any role, there's any signal here in terms of that India is not going to regulate AI. I just hope that they aren't going to regulate AI by random statements. The EU, on the other hand, obviously always errs on the side of caution, and they always have the most strictest laws as far as tech is concerned. And already there are voices opposing it, saying that it will stifle innovation, etc., etc. But credit where it's due. Their first real actual AI regulation act is out, and I think we should welcome that.
I think some thoughts also is that, with the election year that's happening right now in India, this is also like a warning, shot across the board, because obviously it's also about trying to set a deterrent to all these models as they're trying to get their act together. But, more on the EU side, Jaspreet, how do you see it in terms of, is it also going down the path of pre-approvals and everything, or is it more about, general guidelines and, guardrails?
No, it goes beyond guidelines. I haven't frankly studied the act in detail. It's in my bucket list of about 400,000 items which I need to go through on AI, which happen every week. But it's fairly strict. For example, in some of the higher risk things, it calls for the fact that irrespective of where the AI model is developed, if it's kind of rolled out in the EU, people will have to conform to that act. So it's not that only if it's developed in the EU or anywhere it needs to conform to that. Obviously, it is very strictly against deepfakes, copyright issues, etc., etc. And I don't know how possible will it be for especially generative AI models. This covers all AI, but especially generative AI models to conform to that. EU has its own generative AI champions, like Mistral, for example, out of France. And already the French President Macron has kind of opposed it, saying that it might not be passed in French Parliament. And so there are some issues regarding its. People say that it's kind of between innovation and safety. It's too much on the side of safety.
Right.
And so, I mean, very frankly, one will have to study it more to see what it really has and hasn't.
And another legislation that is making its way up through, really should I say, the US law is this very interesting proposition that's coming from Bernie Sanders, where basically he's talking about now having a 4-day week with no cut to pay, because he's saying AI and all the advances in technology is actually making productivity increase. And therefore humans are entitled now to a 4-week, work thing. And I think this is probably the first shot towards moving towards a, UBI, universal basic income. I mean, I know you are not a big fan of that. We've discussed that in detail, but politics and politicians, we're going to see some of this happening. Any thoughts on this?
I haven't seen this. I just saw one headline. You're much faster than I am, Vivek, in terms of, seeing all these items, etc. I just saw this, but I didn't relate it to AI, frankly. I'm seeing this for the first time that is related. AI has become again, there's an article I wrote, it has become the bogeyman for everything. I'm hungry because of AI. I'm not hungry because there's AI. Okay, so in fact, we talked about it, but a lot of the companies doing layoffs, I think, are just using it as an excuse.
Right.
And probably the same here. But what this reminds me, Vivek, is of something which Bill Gates said much earlier, of something called a robot tax.
That's
and
right.
he said that, if people are going to, if robots are going to do the work of human beings, they need to be taxed. And that tax needs to kind of get into universal basic income or equivalent for human beings.
Right.
The US, as you know, is very sharply divided between the left and the right. And I think both sometimes give out crazy statements for their own, which appeal to their own constituencies. With all due respect, I think this is the one which is coming from the left side of the constituency.
Absolutely. Yeah. So,
Just
moving along.
that, because I'm doing this from my phone, Vivek, can you see me? I can't see myself.
Oh, no, we can see you.
Okay, cool. That's good then. Okay.
Right. So, basically the next one really is about, Apple has been a laggard. I mean, I think in the last 4 weeks or 5 weeks, we've just not even touched upon Apple, right? But then, it's apparently been quietly making these acquisitions along the way, small AI companies, not very big ones. They made one Canadian company. And then I think around 2-3 days back, they just dropped this thing, right? Which is MM1, which is apparently their version of LLM, which is apparently trained again on some 350 billion parameters. So, people are really saying that, listen, I mean, Apple is very, very quietly plugging away in the background, and the next version of Siri will probably be the Siri that we all wanted it to be, right? And just on that, before I asked for your thought, I mean, I came across a very interesting statement by Benedict Evans. He mentioned, he said, look, I'm old enough to remember the last time people said that Apple wouldn't be able to do AI. Right, and I think a very interesting insight is that incumbents always try to make the new thing a feature. So if you think about it, for Apple, it's just a feature that's going to be part of our, our PCs, our mobiles, our iPads. Could you just linger on that point?
Okay. I would not underestimate Apple at all. You're absolutely right. In fact, they have probably made the highest number of investment in buying AI innovation through startups, patents, etc. More than Microsoft, more than Google. Yes, they have been not been out there, launching, if I may say so, yet another large language model. For that matter, if you think about it, so is Amazon. Okay, and
That's
so.
True.
And I think both Apple and Amazon, and since we're talking on Apple here, are companies which don't want to put out a language model out there because it's not going to do anything for them, frankly.
Right.
They're not in the search business. They're not in the productivity software business. So, Apple clearly, with all the investments it's making, will definitely come with, building it into their products, like Benedict Evans has said here, and the feature part, I completely agree. In fact, now here's a news which I think I'm a little ahead of you, where I think I just caught this news 2-3 hours back sitting in a car, so I haven't read it, but there's this rumors of a massive Apple-Google deal, which is in the works, where Gemini will be integrated into Apple products. So I guess Apple does believe in Gemini more than a lot of other people do. And Gemini will be integrated into Apple, much like the search was integrated into Apple. I think that to close, I think they will come up with, each of their products becoming much, much better using generative AI any way they use. Using generative AI rather than having their own. They don't need an Apple GPT. I mean, what's an Apple GPT going to do with them except make their fan base happy?
That is very well said. I think in all of this, in all the noise, I think they seem to be very clear, right? And you know what? Today, I think we're having a problem with technology because I think my PowerPoint is now misbehaving. Just give me a second.
So while you struggle with your PowerPoint, we must also remember they did one more thing. They shelved their car project and have reallocated all the resources, the people, as well as the money into AI and generative AI. So they're clearly a player.
There was this really, fascinating drop, that was happened about OpenAI. I think that, like you said, OpenAI doesn't disappoint. And I think there's an announcement with Figure One and OpenAI. I think they raised around close to $1 billion. I think around $700 million, OpenAI being one of the larger, contributors to that round. And then they integrated the whole robotics, with the OpenAI LLM and now the OpenAI text-to-speech, right? Any thoughts on that? Because I think that was
No, that's a great one. The 700 is a curious one. The 7 thing seems to be good for 700 million, 7 trillion. Okay, all these numbers seem to be very close to OpenAI's hearts. But look, I think, in fact, the next article that I'm contemplating writing, in my fortnightly series is on AI hardware. And, as I read something, another article in Financial Times many weeks back, which was very interesting. James Thornhill, and he said that hardware is eating the world, not software. Okay, not software, like which famously has been said. And he was coming from the chips and the semiconductors and the that, because those were really, and NVIDIA and TSMC and ASML making those machines, etc., who were actually, if you think about it, it's these quote unquote hardware companies which have benefited, probably the only companies which have benefited from a revenue standpoint from generative AI especially. So there's a lot of action happening in hardware, and then we had this other set of hardware, agent related hardware, which I think we'll see a boom of, which is the AI pin and the Rabbit R1, etc., which are post-mobile, post-smartphone devices. And I think the third set of hardware is the Figure kind of hardware. There are a bunch of people making robotics, but Figure has had the most celebrated founders, and they have had the most attention, especially in Silicon Valley, also because of the OpenAI partnership. And how now OpenAI's software can empower great hardware. And in many ways, it's the same agent thing that, this generative AI becomes an agent. And rather than software agents, now there'll be hardware agents in some sense, where you can actually also do that stuff. But I think hardware, as the name itself suggests, is very hard. Okay. And so, even Musk, who's been making his own robot for a while, has been struggling with that. Okay. And it'll be interesting to see how while the software for that robot might be very exciting, how they can manage to, get basic functions done, humanoid functions done from Figure, will be really the key. And so it's not about generative AI as much as it will be about sensors and hardware and actuators and, gyroscopes and some of those things, which are far more difficult to control than the software is.
No, great points. So I think with this, let's move along to the topic today, which is really about AI and the road to singularity, part 2. Will AI become smarter than humans? So when we kind of touch upon this point around smartness and intelligence, I think the question really, I think first arises that, before we make a statement like that, what exactly do we mean by intelligence? I mean, if you think about it, for all practical purposes, calculators, your humble Casio calculator and your supercomputers, I mean, they've been, really beating humans for I would say now maybe a couple of decades now, when it comes to compute, when it comes to logic, whether it's chess or whether it's Go. But we've never really thought of them as really an intelligent being, or as an existential threat, right? So what should be a good metric of intelligence when we make these kind of statements? Is it creativity, logic, task? Any thoughts on that?
No, that's a very good question. When I was at Cambridge, we had like a seminar to talk about artificial intelligence, and it was a day-long thing. And we never progressed because at the end of the day, no one could even define intelligence. Okay.
Yeah.
There are many definitions of intelligence. Okay. If you kind of Google for it or better go to perplexity.ai or whatever, there are many, many definitions of intelligence. But there is none, I mean, there is none which is a universally accepted definition as far as this area is concerned. I also remember reading a book, very good book by famous book, great book by a lady called Kate Crawford called The Atlas of AI. And she had a startling statement there saying that AI is neither artificial nor intelligent. And the artificial part, why it's not, is because, there's so much human beings behind what we think is AI. Millions, tens of thousands of people labeling stuff and doing stuff which makes AI happen. But the ghost workers, as they call them. But the other part was that why it's not intelligent because we don't even have a definition, and in many ways, even what a baby can do, most AI cannot do. And that's where the Musk statement comes in very interestingly. Okay, because intelligence, even if you were to say, okay, fine, intelligence is everything that a human being can think and basically because of that thinking can do, then which human being? Okay, I mean, human beings can have IQs, which is a measure of intelligence, from 30 to 200. So which human being are you talking about? Are you talking about an average? But then is that intelligence? Because human beings are famously collaborate. They have language, they talk to each other. And so they use the sum total of intelligence rather than a single person's intelligence. That's why there are organizations, and organizations have multiple employees and people because it's not one person. And so that's why this concept of, okay, not one person, but global human intelligence, all intelligence that exists in every human being in the world, which according to Musk, who just likes to say things, is going to happen in a year. Okay, so I don't have a definition, honestly, of intelligence. What it is not, it's not consciousness. Okay, they are separate. Okay, what it is not, it's not, I mean, you shouldn't confuse it with emotion. Okay, intelligence can be, I mean, one way to define intelligence is just logic. Another way to define intelligence is mathematical intelligence. Okay, a stretch is emotional intelligence, but that's a stretch. And so there's really, I wish I could come up with a globally accepted definition. I would be a famous man if I could.
You are a famous man, but I think you made a very interesting observation out here. You said that intelligence is not consciousness, right? And I think for the longest, we've been actually conflating three elements. Consciousness, intelligence, and you could say human beings, or you could say carbon-based life forms in that sense, right? And I think to the best of our knowledge, at least at this point in time, it's only probably carbon-based life form which apparently have all the three, right? I think what we are now probably going to be trying to explore is now you've seen that you can actually have silicon-based item like a computer or an AI which can be intelligent. It just doesn't have consciousness, And I think the question is, and we discussed upon it last time, is there going to be more compute which will kind of get you consciousness or something else, right? I think this is a very interesting time when we finally start seeing things in a very different light.
Yeah, if you look at the periodic table, Vivek, carbon and silicon lie next to each other. Okay, one below the other, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, and so they're actually very close. And most things which are close on the periodic table tend to combine. Okay,
interesting.
Yeah, but carbon and silicon do not. There is no silicon carbonate, for example, or carbon silicate or whatever. It doesn't exist. Okay, making carbon and silicon fuse from a chemistry standpoint is like you have to force fit. You can't make an element naturally out of that. And so, I mean, if you were to take that analogy in a sense, carbon and silicon are kind of very, very much in their own parallel worlds in that sense. Okay? And that's why, if you were to have cyborgs, it's not about having a chemical composition, which would be both carbon and silicon. At least we can't think of it now, but it will be more, how silicon related things are inserted into a carbon life form, or maybe vice versa. We haven't tried the vice versa yet, but maybe vice versa. And so, that was just more of an aside. But if you were to come back to, what you said in terms of consciousness versus, and you're right, we have conflated the two many times. We think of artificial super intelligence or general intelligence automatically to be conscious. Okay,
That's
which is not true. No one has claimed that AGI is conscious. In fact, no one has also claimed that AGI has emotions. Okay, those are, in my mind at least, there are massive scholars of consciousness, and it's perhaps the most studied thing in AI research today. So I'm very, very much a novice there. But they are not the same thing. And I think you can have a super intelligent machine which could, perform intelligence tasks like logic or mathematics or pattern recognition and pattern making or forecasting prediction basis that. But that doesn't mean that it will be conscious. And coming to the last part, what would it take? I think we spoke about it last time. David Chalmers, who's one of the most well-known person in the most well-known philosopher in the study of consciousness, defined consciousness as the hard problem of philosophy. Okay, and which basically is that no one has been able to figure out still what does it take to be conscious. People have managed to study the brain till the synapse, of the neuron and the synapse firing, etc. But then what magic happens after that? Everyone, I think there we need to move from, people are look at it from a religion and a philosophy lens, but from a scientific lens, very difficult. And if we are not able to figure out from a scientific lens, either it will just happen because we keep on pouring things, just adding and making some kind of a stew and something emerges, silicon based, out of serendipity or just luck. Okay, but I think from a systematic viewpoint, I know of no possible way that we can kind of start building consciousness into machines because of the problems that I talked.
I wonder if you've heard this talk by Roger Penrose, who definitely has to be one of the what should I say, the biggest genius of all times in that sense, and he was the Nobel Prize winner of 2020. He actually talked about he wrote somewhere that he's very convinced now that computation will never lead you to consciousness, right? And very interestingly, I think it was an anesthetist who kind of reached out to him, and he said, Roger, we should think about when does consciousness ceases to exist. And he says, when you actually administer anesthesia, is when consciousness, as we know, ceases to exist. We talk about general anesthesia at that sense, and that's when he talked about these protein structures called microtubules in the brain, which apparently is. So now Roger Penrose apparently is quite convinced that microtubules is probably where you will eventually find the genesis of consciousness. And in his mind, consciousness is something that's always going to be linked to biology. It's never going to be something that can be created. So I don't know if you've really come across that, but that's a wonderful.
I do remember reading it. Penrose obviously is a giant in the field, and therefore I have nothing more to say beyond what he's saying. But there are many approaches. For example, there's the Indian philosophy approach, where there are these 4 states, right? So there's the state of waking, where obviously you're conscious. And then there's the second state, which is the state of dreaming, okay, where also you're conscious, okay, your mind is kind of creating images. There's a third state, which is the state of deep sleep, okay, where people are divided, whether you're conscious or not really conscious. And then there's the fourth state, which is Thuraya. Thuraya basically in Sanskrit means 4. Okay, 4. And the fourth state, which you achieve through meditation and samadhi, etc., is where you're not conscious. Okay, and you kind of look, there are multiple ways. It's all in this area right now. Okay, and Penrose, I think, wrote about what you're saying decades back. But I don't see that people have figured out in those decades that therefore this is where consciousness lies. And so I also see that as one possible theory, but we don't have any
Right.
proofs in that sense of that.
Now, I'm just pulling myself away from this whole discussion on consciousness because this is very seductive. But there are a couple of very interesting points, and I think one good point I think that we seem to be agreeing on just today is that consciousness and AGI and ASI, we need to start thinking of them as independent, because I think people really get caught up with consciousness, and I think it's all about just having a very super intelligent being. There are a couple of questions here from Anand and Sakshi. So Anand is saying that as AI continues to advance, do you think it will eventually outstrip human cognitive abilities? Or will you always believe that there will be eventually a distinctive boundary? Again, here, I think we'll have to first define a cognitive limit in that sense. So, and the second thing is Sakshi saying, do you think there's a limit to how smart AI can get? Or do you think the sky is the limit? Because we apparently have some limitations about what a brain can do, but, raw compute power, parameters, I don't know. I mean, how do you think about these questions, which I'm sure you do?
I feel so inadequate, frankly, answering them, to be very honest. Okay, Sakshi, and sorry, who was the other person?
Anand
and Sakshi, I really feel inadequate because one of the things I learned while I was doing my master's was as to how little I knew in this. Okay, and I wish I could spend the rest of my life reading or researching or thinking about this, but that one needs to make a living, etc., and so I'm not kind of doing that. But it's inadequate because there's a lot more nuance than what I will tell you in terms of whatever I know a little bit. First of all, I think a lot of scholars say that we don't use more than we use probably 1% of your brain. Okay.
Yeah.
Some say 10%, some say 5%, whatever. Basically, we say we use a small percentage of the ability that lies in our brain itself. Okay. And so if you were to kind of take that thing at face value, there's so much more to go. Okay. In terms of just realizing what you can do from the brain itself. I mean, and a lot of, again, I'm drifting away from science in that sense. And a lot of yogis, etc., become those supermen or super women, not because they have additional powers, but they can realize more power from what exists with everyone.
Yeah.
I mean, let me take an ordinary mortal like Yuval Noah Harari. Okay, and one of the reasons why when people ask him, how can you think like what you think? Okay, are you like different? He says no, and he says that, look, the only reason I can think is because I do 40 days of Vipassana every year, and that makes me get out more from my own brain and my own abilities. Number one. Number two, even if we were to reach, say, some kind of a limit, okay, I think that's when the kind of work that our friend Elon Musk is doing and others, with the Neuralink, etc., of enhancing the human brain through artificial means in that sense. And so you could kind of strap on or add on, little motors to your brain, okay, which could further enhance your brain power. So the short answer, what I'm trying to tell you is, I do think, and many people say that, some people disagree, that I think eventually the super intelligence, or whatever name you give it, will not be a purely artificial super intelligence. I think it'll be like a artificial and natural human intelligence kind of fused together in some way. And I think that's the fastest route, in a sense, to super intelligence. Okay, fused together, much like the Neuralink kind of experiments,
right?
And creating, therefore, these super beings, which sound frightening right now, but I think that's the way it will go, rather than one outstripping the other, and that's what actually he calls Homo Deus.
Yeah. I can't but think of imagining an era. I mean, right now we have problem with socially incorrect thing to say, but in the US or in other countries where you have got trans people competing in the women's race and beating them, so the whole debate is about whether the person is a he or a she in that sense, and then you're going to tomorrow have whether the person is a human or a it, or is a cyborg, what should I say, that's competing with humans. So I think we're going to be in for some interesting time, and I think
in fact, there's a simpler example. Sorry to interrupt, Vivek.
No,
but
sure.
Who was that guy, Pistorius, the South African guy, the runner, who was who was accused of murdering his girlfriend, etc., who below the knee did not have legs,
Yeah,
had those
yeah, yeah.
blades, right?
Absolutely,
And he was
absolutely.
winning amazing races. Okay, and we're
Yeah,
talking of 10 years back.
right.
So already, you're having like a fused human being, and then there was this whole thing about should he be allowed to run in races at all or not. So I think we're going to see more and more of these
More and more,
questions.
absolutely.
Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
philosophers and lawyers are going to be in big demand. So I think that's probably one job that will be safe. There's a very interesting question here from Ayesha, but Jaspreet, and it touches upon one of your favorite topics about social AI. And
Mm.
she said that like new AI tools like Project December, that people chat with virtual versions of loved ones who have passed away. Do you think AI chatbots can be a healthy tool for grief management, or is there a risk? I mean, obviously now we talk about ethical risk and everything, but some thoughts from you.
Yeah, I mean, in one of these days in this program, Vivek, will get in Dr. Henry Shevlin, who was my professor
And
at
yeah,
Cambridge,
I've heard him. He's very good. Yeah,
and he's credited with actually creating the term social AI. And
interesting.
he's writing a book about it now. And he taught us post my 2 year course. He actually did a special class for that. And I intend to write about that also. I promised him. Uh, so we will have a much better answer. Let me put it that way. But with from him. I think, I also want to say as an aside, Vivek, that I think one of the things I do want to say is that as we do these conversations and the people who are hearing and asking questions, I'm keep, I think none of us is going to know everything about it. And I keep on saying these names because I really like these and admire these people. And some of the names you say, Penrose, etc. And I hope the people who have asked questions or are hearing also go and explore these people to answer their questions,
Yeah,
because that to me is the real purpose of our talks. Okay, of exciting curiosity and having the right people answer rather than just say you and I. But anyway, that was an aside. On Aisha, on this bit, what I know is it's inevitable. Okay, what I can say with certainty, that having AI companions is inevitable. It's a perfect storm. There's a loneliness epidemic in the world for multiple reasons, economic and otherwise. Younger people are not dating and marrying as much as they used to. Okay, that's number two. Number three, uh, younger people especially have gotten used to having artificial companions like their mobile phones, okay,
yeah,
and immersing themselves in it. Four, as more immersive technologies like the Apple's Vision Pro and others come in, I think the perfect, and then obviously there's AI and Gen AI and all these different things being created. It's inevitable that the movie like Her, or apps like Replica, which were an early beginners, are going to evolve into AI. I mean, we are going to have AI companions. Forget AI companions. I think in very short order, CHROs are going to grapple with how to work with humans and AIs as employees in their organization. Okay, and so I think this whole coexisting with AIs, whether from a emotional or work colleague or whatever standpoint, is bound to happen. Yes, it'll raise ethical issues, it'll raise massive ethical issues, and it'll raise huge philosophical issues, and a lot of older people especially will not accept this in their children's lives, and kind of think of it as something absolutely harmful and not right. But frankly, I think this is that route to that same thing we were discussing, Vivek, which is that eventually it's going to be a fused human and
yeah.
human and AI. And
Right.
the last thing I would say is that whenever you want to know a little bit about the future in technology and science, read science fiction. And there's
Yeah.
enough science fiction out there which talks about human, non-human relationships
Yeah.
and friendships. Uh, I think it's inevitable, it's bound to happen, and it's a huge area of new questions which we'll have to answer.
Jaspreet, again, your favorite and perhaps, my favorite, Yuval Harari actually talked about consciousness once, I mean, he's touched upon it multiple times. And in one of his talks, he was saying that, listen, if you think of it, consciousness is actually, again, a very social construct, if you think of it. Because he said, look, the thing that we've always grappled with is that I know I'm conscious, but I have no way of knowing whether you are conscious. Or all the other people on the chat are. I mean, maybe we are just in a very large Truman Show right now, right, where the world is filled with insentient beings. Because consciousness is a very, very subjective, personal, aspiration, or personal, relatable, subject. Uh, and he said, but now we have made a social concept that because I'm conscious, maybe people around me are also, they have consciousness around there. And then a lot of pet owners, for example, said dog, pet owners especially will say that, my dog is 101% conscious, but they won't attribute the same thing, let's say, to a pig, who apparently on scales of intelligence, is far more intelligent. Yeah, but when you eat a bacon, or when you kind of do that, you don't think of them as conscious beings. And similarly with plants, and so on and so forth. So his view was it's a very social construct when you think about it, right? And I think what's going to happen is you're going to start thinking in terms of, okay, you know what, this buddy of mine, which is this phone, which is talking to me, is actually also very, very conscious, because this person is able to give me such a nice hearing when my boyfriend or my girlfriend or my spouse can't do that, right? And then when that starts happening then that's when the registration starts coming in, because when people are convinced about something, things are happening. So any thoughts on this?
You project consciousness to something else.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Sure. No, that's a good way to think about it. I mean, I haven't thought of it that way. Yeah, that's a great way to think about it.
Interesting. And then there's, by the way, Pi says that you're talking about the Blade Runner, Pistorius. Yeah, that's the person.
Blade Runner. Yeah, that's right. Pistorius was called the Blade Runner. I was searching for that word. Yeah,
absolutely. Lakshmi is saying that sorry, she's again talking about the super smart buddy. Interesting thing. So I'll just first put her a question and then kind of build on it. Lakshmi is saying, do you think AI could become like a super smart buddy, making us feel like the sidekick in our own story? So we become really like the co-pilot. In fact, I mean, and there's been a lot of talk, right? And Microsoft announced co-pilot. But I think with the launch of Devin, right? I mean, it's saying that it looks like we are going to become the co-pilot, and that's going to become the main pilot, right? So,
no. So the pilot co-pilot thing is not about intelligence. It's not about who's more intelligent than the other, and the one who's more intelligent or capable should be the pilot. Okay, that's not the definition. The definition of pilot co-pilot is who has the agency, who can perform action. Okay. Now, if, for example, if I was to compete with a AI even today in terms of figuring out what are the best flights for me to get from here to Belize, okay, which is not like Bombay to Delhi. Okay, so from here to Belize or here to Patagonia. Okay, and if I and an AI were to compete, I can assure you that all 10 out of 10 times the AI will win. Okay, because it's about super getting lots of data together and very quickly crunching it and bringing the optimal. So optimization is something which with data, something that an AI could do. Now, does that mean that if I'm a travel agent, okay, I become the co-pilot and the AI is the pilot, because every single time it can do travel arrangements faster? No, the thing is that my customer has entrusted me as the travel agent, okay, to do the task, human travel agent, if he has, and also figure out other things like, is this the right weather, and there was a coup there, so is there like a problem on the streets or whatever. But the agency of booking the ticket, of actually saying yes, I want the ticket, and then pushing whatever button and linking the wallet to get the money, etc., or even if the wallet is linked, saying that yes, go ahead, is with the pilot. And the Microsoftian definition of a co-pilot is linked to agency, not intelligence. Okay, and so I think whether there's Devin or not doesn't really matter.
And there's an interesting comment by a mutual fund, Deepak DC, who says that wouldn't it be amazing if I could simply outsource my Vipassana to my AI? So
Deepak, dream on.
I think yeah. When it comes to enlightenment, I guess still have to be some work to be done by us, right, and not by a co-pilot in that sense.
Absolutely.
Jaspreet, there's still a couple of questions, but I just want to be respectful of the time, because I know you have an event to get to, and we've really spent close to around 50 minutes, and I think this was really fantastic. And let's just think about what could we touch upon next time. I mean, maybe social AI consciousness. Let's debate that. I would request the community to kind of drop in some questions. And I think let's take you on your point. Maybe we should start dropping in the YouTube links and the article links, for some of the speakers and the topics that we've talked about. I think that would be a great way to kind of, build the community on this. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Sorry for being late. And actually, I again repeat that I feel inadequate with some of these questions. I wish I knew more, but hopefully it excites curiosity to go learn more. So thanks.
No, I think all the conversation really, always, give us a view. And I think even the smartest people like Roger Penrose, for example, even he says that, look, I have no idea about this, but let me try. And I think that's the area that we are in. I think we are all speculating, we're all deliberating. And I think it's just about having that rigor, right? As we try to make sense of this, right? No, lovely. Thank you so much. Yeah, Jaspreet, lovely. Sorry, you were saying something?
No, just that. Lovely to be here. Thank you very much.
All right. Have a good one. Have a great evening.
Thank you. Bye-bye.